move forward, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to. Go ahead, Vicki.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm Vicki Wilde and I'm speaking to you from Seattle, Washington. And I see that there's over 140 of you already logged in to join us, showing a great deal of interest in this topic. I'm welcoming you to this virtual learning event on innovative gender transformative approaches for addressing gender equality in agriculture, economic empowerment, and water sanitation sectors. This is jointly organized by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the International Center for Research on Women. I sit on the agriculture team of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where I have the privilege of leading our portfolio of investments designed to empower women. And it was during my first 18 months at the Gates Foundation that I had the opportunity to join the team that designed this grand challenge to empower women and girls. And I served on the team that helped select its winners. In fact, I think that's where I first met our today's president, Rodger. And I had the privilege of overseeing some of the winning grants over these past few years. All this to say, I could not be more excited to share with you what we've been learning from these innovative investments designed to challenge the underlying power dynamics that today hold back women and girls from their full potential. Before we get started in the content, I'd like to share with you a few notes on how we'll proceed over this next hour. Unless you're a panelist, please keep your microphones on mute and your cameras off. We have many people worldwide calling in and we need to protect the bandwidth. We will start with a series of 3 short presentations, each providing a high-level overview of a project. And under the handouts, you can find an overview of those. And then following the project overviews, we'll have a short panel discussion. And the rest of the time, we will dedicate to questions and answers. Therefore, as we go, at any time you like, please use the chat window on the right side of your screen to send in your questions and your comments. And we will collate these and get them to our presenters to address during the Q&A period. So to get us started, I'm happy to introduce you to our fearless leader and president, Rodger Voorhies, president of the Foundation's Global Growth and Opportunity Division. Rodger?
Thanks, Wynn. Thanks, Vicki. And I think that actually you're right. That's where we first met. And I got to tell you, I have a couple opening remarks, but just extemporaneously, one of the things I'm really glad about getting to kick this off today has been that in the midst of the coronavirus epidemic and pandemic now, the impact on women and girls is differential. And what we know pretty deeply is that women often suffer first, suffer longer, and recover last. And we've seen increased articles from CARE, from PLAN, from the UN on violence and other things. And I just think that the webinar today is a really timely place where this work comes together to understand what works for women and girls, but also how we respond as a global community. And so thank you all for joining, because I can't imagine a more important time. As Vicki said, I'm Rodger Voorhies, president of Global Growth and Opportunity Division at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Once again, happy to welcome you today. And as I'm sure most of you know, this webinar series was created to share what was learned from the Foundation's Women and Girls, Girls at the Center of Development Grand Challenge. It was launched in 2015 to expand the Foundation's gender-driven work, and it received the most submissions in history of the Grand Challenges program, with over 1,742 letters of interest from 128 countries. In the year since, our focus on gender equality has increased as a foundation. In 2016, we made an $80 million commitment to close the gender gap and to help accelerate progress toward the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 5 on gender equality. And then in 2018, we launched our first ever gender equality strategy with a focus on advancing women's economic empowerment which is where we just thought in our beginning stages as a foundation, we can make the biggest impact on women and girls. We also have a deepening gender integration program at the foundation and have learned a lot from many of your organizations on the call about how we accelerate this within the foundation. And we've introduced a gender lens across our entire global work into how we define problems, define and design solutions, and measure the results. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, this applies to emerging situations like COVID-19 as well, where we're closely tracking the effects of the pandemic on women and girls specifically. And as we learn from partners and investments, we evolve our approaches to ensure we're making the greatest impact across the board, like many of you are. Today, the Women and Girls Grand Challenge has grown into a partnership of 38 foundation investments, working to advance opportunities through bold thinking and solutions across the globe. Key part of this sharing and building on what we've learned together, and this series helps us do that in a more concrete way. Before I hand things over, I'd just like to share my heartfelt appreciation to all the Grand Challenge partners. I've had a chance to individually meet with many of you and learn from the work you're doing, and just the acceleration of progress towards the gender equality is continuously challenging, but absolutely critical, because we will not make continued development gains without women and girls at the center of that development. And I just appreciate just the insights you've given, the data you created, and then just the hard hits you've given us to think about this issue more clearly. So today, Vicki Wilde, our Senior Program Officer for Agricultural Development here at the Foundation, will moderate the discussion with implementers of 3 Women and Girls Grand Challenge projects: Karen, Burundi and Uganda, Helen Keller International in Cambodia, and their conversation will be focused on innovative approaches to achieving gender equality in economic empowerment, agriculture, and the water sanitation sectors. I think their insights into obstacles and triumphs and execution, cost and measurement will be a special interest to like-minded organization. And now, thanks for the introduction, Vicki, and I will turn it back to you to kick things off.
Thank you, Rodger. Thanks very much. All right, now each of the 3 projects we'll be learning from today approach the challenges of gender transformative work from a different cultural context and toward a different set of programmatic goals, some in agriculture, some in financial services, some in nutrition, and through a different set of activities. So we want to start with providing you with a high-level overview of each of the projects. And our first speaker is Gwyneth Coates, and she's calling in today from Cambodia, where she is the country director for Helen Keller International in Cambodia and Indonesia. She has spent more than 15 years working around the world, developing programs to effectively integrate health, nutrition, food security, and gender equality. She holds an MPH in International Health from Tulane University. Gwyneth, over to you.
Thank you so much, Vicki and Rodger. And on behalf of Helen Keller International, I'm just really pleased to have been able to be a part of the WGCD community and to have the opportunity today to talk about our work in Cambodia. So the project I'm going to talk to you about today is the Women-Centered Homestead Food Production, or EHFP project, which ran from 2016 to 2020 in Tpong Khmum province in Cambodia. So the aim of this project was to sustainably improve nutrition and livelihoods. We worked among poor rural households that had young children, and we were especially looking to improve dietary diversity, production of nutritious foods, access to animal source foods, increased household income, and to achieve greater gender equality. And this project was actually a study, a 3-arm study, and we were looking to see if adding the gender components and gender transformative components would have improvements in terms of women's empowerment and equality, and also would it result in improved nutrition and food security outcomes for those households. So the basic project was designed around our EHFP model, our homestead food production model, which includes training and support to farming households through a village model farm in each community. And each of those VMFs works with 10 households. So as you can see on the left in that little diagram, there are a number of interventions that we're able to deliver through the VMF platform, and also working in collaboration with village health support groups in Cambodia. And some of those interventions include training on agriculture production, creating linkages to input suppliers, delivery of our Nurturing Connections gender transformative approach, which I'll talk more about, training on nutrition and hygiene, marketing and business skills training, and then also supporting community structures such as the Village Health Support Group. So in the project, we targeted a little over 1,000 households for the intervention side. The project included 520 households in each of the 3 arms. So there was a control arm, and then there was a standard EHFP arm, which is focused on food security and nutrition. And then there was what we call the EHFP plus arm. And the main difference between the EHFP and the EHFP plus arms was the implementation of a gender transformative kind of discussion circles approach, which we call Nurturing Connections. And that was delivered through 7 intensive facilitated discussion sessions led by HKI staff. Next slide, please. So we gathered data through baseline and endline household survey, and we also used the Pro-WEAI tool to assess women's empowerment. And then we supplemented that data with quarterly monitoring data on production, time use, and income. We're still analyzing some of the monitoring data, so these results are from our baseline and endline data. So overall, kind of on the right-hand side, you see that the EHFP and the EHFP plus households had improved income, better dietary diversity, better crop diversity, improved wash practices, and better nutrition knowledge. We found that the EHFP plus model showed small improvements over the regular EHFP model, but in most cases that wasn't a significant difference. That could have been a sample size issue. So we did see a trend towards better food security and nutrition outcomes, but it wasn't measurable in all cases. And these food security and nutrition outcomes are very consistent with other EHFP programs that HKI has implemented in Cambodia and other countries. So on the left-hand side, looking at one of these kind of key Pro-WEAI results, when we looked at those Pro-WEAI results, we saw the best results in terms of women's control over income and also around household decision-making. But there wasn't a lot of change in terms of attitudes towards things like intimate partner violence or gender roles. And we believe that some of the positive results around use of income, for example, are largely because within this domain, we also provided skills-based training on marketing and household income management, and women had the chance to put those skills into practice. And so that practice-based learning reinforced what the couples were discussing during the Nurturing Connection circles. Next slide. So you might think that we'd be a little disappointed to not see the big changes in gender norms and attitudes, but realistically speaking, we didn't expect to see huge sweeping changes in the course of a year or two. These are things, social norms, gender norms are things that really take time to change. We did identify, many notable examples of households where we saw increased cooperation and dialogue among partners, and there were also subtle improvements among households that had benefited from the gender transformative curriculum. And I think on behalf of HKI, we believe that it's worthwhile and important to incorporate gender transformative approaches in food security and nutrition programs. It makes me think of the saying, that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And we think it's really important that we start making those steps in all of our programs towards improved gender equality. Go ahead to the next slide. Great. So people always want to know about the kind of challenges and recommendations. So implementing gender transformative approaches in general is difficult. It requires intensive effort. It can be difficult to do at scale well. Some of the big challenges that we experienced were really around sustaining participation and engagement. And this was particularly a challenge in Cambodia, where we see a lot of labor migration. And so we had some different results, I think, than in other countries where we've implemented gender transformative approaches. The participation and engagement was particularly challenging among men, and we encouraged men to attend with their partners to the sessions. We also found that some of the recommendations from the initial formative research got out of date quickly. And you know, that could be maybe the findings weren't valid, or maybe they were influenced by, you know, the internal biases of the people who are doing the formative research. It's hard to know. So for example, during the initial consultations, we found that it wouldn't be a barrier for men and women to participate together in joint sessions, but in practice, we found that there were sensitive subjects that would have been probably better to separate men and women. Another really big challenge is finding the level of skilled facilitators needed to get good dialogue going on difficult topics like gender-based violence. Our staff needed a lot of support in this area. And then I also mentioned that just norm change occurs slowly, and that can lead to reduced interest on the part of donors and stakeholders, and it can be hard to get people to believe that this is really important to do. In terms of what we would do differently next time, I think we would place more emphasis on monitoring engagement and participation, and we would work to identify and address barriers more quickly in real time. We also need to look at the design of, you know, gender transformative discussion groups and curriculum to make sure that the timing and the formats and the different groupings are facilitating participation and involvement of participants. For example, that might mean carrying out activities on weekends or really meeting people where they are. It's also really important for the project team to have opportunities for regular reflection, assessment, and review, and to be able to adapt your approaches and materials midstream if needed. And that can be challenging when you already have developed, you know, a curriculum or a set of materials and you've printed those materials, and, you know, having the flexibility to change those midstream can be a challenge. So you have to think about how you would do that. One of the really important things in this project was coaching and mentoring of the facilitators, which we started to do more intensively after a few months. That took time, and it also took a supervisor who was really knowledgeable on gender issues, and it's not always easy to find that kind of skill set in Cambodia. We're also, right now, we're looking at different ways to make content easier to deliver and in a more standardized way. So we're exploring options like incorporating film or SMS messages that would make the content delivery easier for the facilitators. And then finally, you know, using multiple channels, you know, adding in more mass media would have really been beneficial, I think, and also making sure that there's a mixture of the gender transformative training and curriculum approach, but also real practical skills-based training for women to be able to, you know, put things into practice. All right, next slide. All right, so I just wanted to finish up. I mentioned that we use the Pro-WEAI tool to assess women's empowerment. And there were some challenges with using that tool and with measurement in general. So the Pro-WEAI is a tool that asks participants questions around a range of different women's empowerment domains. And it asks women to say to what extent, for example, they agree or disagree with certain statements about their own, you know, capacity, their own participation. We carried out a follow-up assessment with ICRW, where we went back out to communities to explore how well the participants could understand the questions that they were being asked. And what we found was not that encouraging. Women had a really hard time understanding how to answer using a scale, for example. They often just defaulted to saying, I neither agree nor disagree, or I don't know, because they had a really hard time just understanding that scale-based approach at all. And then even after doing really careful translation and back translation, women had a hard time with concepts like participation or input, which might seem very, you know, everyday to us, but weren't really a part of their normal dialogue. And then finally, because they had a hard time understanding the questions, we found that it negatively affected their own confidence when they didn't know an answer, or they felt like they were giving the wrong answers, and it sort of made them feel, for lack of a better word, it made the women feel a little ignorant trying to answer these questions that they didn't get. So I think that that's something that, you know, we've recommended, that we really need to look at how we're doing the measurement in a way that's meaningful to participants. All right, that's pretty much all the time that I have, but I know you guys will have great questions, and I look forward to the discussion later, and I look forward to hearing the other presenters. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gwyneth. That was terrific. And for me, you've highlighted a number of key points that are important to consider in gender transformative work. One is the timeline. Are we realistic about the timeline it takes to see social norm change? Another that you highlighted is the level of skill and experience it takes to do this well and to make the necessary adaptations as you go in transformative work, which will inevitably, the challenges will arise. And also that this project, thank you all, you were among the earliest projects to test the Pro-WEAI, and it just showed the importance of piloting and revisions subsequently made because of that really good and valuable feedback. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Pranati Mohanraj. She is calling in from Odisha, India, but she's going to speak with us about CARE's win-win program that's implemented in Burundi in sub-Saharan Africa. Pranati is a senior technical advisor for monitoring, learning, and evaluation at CARE USA, supporting agriculture and livelihood projects and programs. Her research focus is on integrating and measuring gender transformative approaches to food and nutrition security. She has a master's degree in social work and a PhD in women's studies from the University of York. Pranati, welcome.
Thank you, Vicki. Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to share CARE's experience of implementing the Win-Win project in Burundi. The Win-Win project aimed at establishing a comparison between a gender transformative model to achieve gender equality, which we call the EQUITA model, and a gender mainstreamed approach in the agriculture sector, that's the gender light model, in which basic activities around gender were integrated into a program whose principal focus and measurement of success were women's economic empowerment through agriculture and microenterprise development. The gender transformative arm of the Win-Win project in Burundi was based on a concept of proof from CARE's successful implementation of the gender transformative EQUITA model, which has been shown to bring significant changes in social norms as well as amplify positive outcomes of large-scale food security projects in South Asia. So we adapted EQUITA model in Burundi, and one of the key questions we had was a gender transformative model from South Asia transferable or adaptable to African context? The EQUITA model was developed in Bangladesh to promote empowerment and social change to attain women's empowerment through improved gender equality, women's economic well-being, and food and nutrition security. EQUITA is based on the work of Paulo Freire, which emphasized the importance of enabling oppressed people to develop the skills and critical consciousness to challenge existing power inequalities and claim basic rights and drive social change. The gender transformative or the EQUITA model in our project focused on developing critical reflection skills, power analysis, and deeper engagement with male relatives of our participating women, male community leaders, and wider community on social norms within the context of group dialogue and the evolution of group solidarity and of course, collective actions. Secondly, focus was also on engaging men and boys, building capacities of role model men, on gender transformative approach, and developing the tools necessary for the facilitation of sensitization and group reflections. We also had livelihood skills component, nutrition education, and market access. All these were emphasized through CARE's Farmer Field and Business School approach, which we call FFBS, and the Village Saving and Loan Association, or in short, VSLA interventions for building capacities on financial literacy and linkages to microfinance. In the gender light model, we included key gender messages for awareness raising around gender. To ensure the program does no harm, spouses and community leaders were informed of the program objectives and gender topics, but were not actively engaged in critical reflection processes. The gender light arm also received livelihood skills, nutrition education, and market access through the FBS and VSLA interventions. These two groups were compared against a typical VSLA intervention as a control group to isolate the impact of VSLA activities. Next slide, please. So to understand the project's impact, we conducted baseline, midline, and endline with mixed methods, including both qualitative and quantitative components. The data analysis is based on a before and after and with and without model to isolate the impacts and analyze additional impacts of implementing a gender transformative model compared to the gender light and the control group. The baseline survey was based on IFRA's Pro-WEAI, and we also did a qualitative midline study, which was carried out in 2018. Data collection for our endline study started in March 2020, but was delayed because of the recent COVID-19 pandemic. We also had a cost-benefit analysis, which was conducted in March 2020, and the data analysis is under progress right now. The qualitative assessment at midline and endline focused on assessing the effectiveness of a gender transformative program on changing gender in social norms and women's empowerment. Let's go to the next slide, please. So, okay, now I would take you through some of the preliminary findings that we have from the midline study conducted in 2018 and the qualitative analysis conducted recently. Unfortunately, we don't have the inline and the cost benefit data in hand now. Next slide, please. So when asked to explain who does what of the agricultural task, the women in the control group were more likely than in other groups to do most of the cultivation tasks themselves. In the gender light and the gender transformative groups, women were more likely than in the control group to say that they work together with their spouses, or that they had a fluid arrangement, according to which whoever has time to goes. For the gender light group, although the common reference seems to be that we do things together, probing questions reveal a more segregated division of agricultural tasks. Overall, men were more satisfied than women with current division of domestic chores. Among the women from the gender transformative reported greater satisfaction in division of both domestic and agricultural chores, followed by women from the gender light group. Women from the control group were least satisfied, and men from the control group appeared to be most satisfied ones. Next slide, please. In terms of decision-making control over income, the differences between the treatment groups are stark. While almost all women and men in all treatments describe their decision-making as joint, there are clear differences in the leverage and actual influence that women have in the processes, particularly in control over income. In the control group, women and men find it inappropriate for men to take decisions. Men in the gender light group spoke of joint consultation, but clearly still retains the veto power and authority in the household. In the gender transformative group, in contrast, spouses jointly pool resources and seem to have concrete and ambitious plans for joint investments, such as building a house together, buying land, or even expanding businesses. On the gender-based violence, as you could see in the graph on your left, the gender transformative participants were far more likely than control or the gender right groups to reject gender-based violence for any reason. Let's go to the next slide, please. So now to say some of the challenges we experienced and the lessons we learned. The first one is around, we try to keep the scientific rigor. This is a research project. So we try to keep the scientific rigor of the research, but there was scope for contamination. For example, one of the partners working in the gender light component was also responsible for agricultural intensification, nutrition, and market extension in all the other project areas. So working with the VSLA's members in gender transformative villages for agricultural activities partner staff had information about the changes and the strategies used by communities for the gender transformative component. The local administration also played a role in this. Village chiefs, for example, who followed the changes in gender transformative communities, shared information on the impact of the gender transformative model during their chief village or call-in meetings. As a result of this, the Ekata group, the gender transformative group, and Men Engaged group received requests from other villages for their capacity building. And then you have to have actually balance between gender transformative actions and the need to mitigate risk at any backlashes. In the gender transformative villages, we engaged heavily with role model men to challenge traditional gender role expectations in their communities through personal change, testimonies, and local community outreach activities. There have been some reports of attempted violence and false accusation made against role model men from other men in the community. Staff capacity, which my previous speaker also touched upon, does play a critical role in implementing gender transformative interventions. Activities related to awareness generation were easier than the gender transformative interventions. For example, taking participants into a reflective journey and planning for collective actions to challenge the identified harmful gender or social norms are really time-taking and requires more of staff capacity. So CARE, as CARE, we invested constantly in staff capacity building through CARE's social analysis and action approach, and we think that helped us addressing that. Whereas we still feel that staff capacity and having keeping the staff motivated is crucial when you are implementing a gender transformative intervention or approach. I would stop here and would look forward to your discussing with you later. Thank you
so much, Pranati. And I know from this investment, I think a few things you've highlighted are especially crucial. One is how CARE very explicitly rolled out innovations to engage men and boys. And this became especially important as the gender-based violence issues came up. And these are in all three arms of your program. They are rice farmers, and you generally our investments in rice farming would focus on the agronomics of rice farming. But the gender-based violence issues that came up across these arms meant that CARE had to be quite explicit and dedicated to addressing gender-based violence issues. And I have to say, from having watched this program over the years, very, very skilled at doing so by engaging the men and boys carefully, by addressing the staff capacity and skills. One other point that's unique about this particular investment is that cost data is being collected across all three arms. And so pretty soon, as Pranati said, for the first time that I think we'll have seen this, we will understand the cost of the control group versus the cost of the gender light versus the cost of the gender transformative arms, and be able to compare those costs with the outcomes and impacts. And that will be an important contribution. Thank you, Pranati. All right, our third project. I'm happy to introduce you to Grace, Majara, and Melch, and they're calling in from Kampala, Uganda. And Grace is a senior technical advisor on the Access Africa team, and she's worked over 18 years in Uganda and other African countries to create innovative solutions and adapt financial services to meet the needs of unbanked women and youth. She holds a master's degree in natural resources and sustainable agriculture from the Agricultural University of Norway and a bachelor's degree from Makerere University, also a very important partner of ours. Grace and Melta, it's over to you to introduce your program. Okay. Are you on mute? There you are. Hello?
Yes. Hello.
Great. We hear you.
Yeah. Merit, are you on mute? It seems like Merit can't come online. Okay, I can take over from Merit.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. This project really was, I mean, the way how we call it, digital sub-wallet projects and household dialogues. These are the two major interventions that the project kind of promoted. The digital sub-wallet is a bank product, whereas the household dialogues, that's one of the gender transformative approaches that we used. The project was set to address a shortage of financial products. We know that there are very few financial products out there that are tailored to meet the needs of women. But for this particular project, was designed specifically to meet the needs of women, providing them with space to create their own needs and be able to save for those needs. But at the same time, added on the aspect of another intervention to address the gender and social barriers that usually affect their financial decision making and the financial autonomy. So the gender light part of the project was this was a research-based project like any other the two which have been talked about, and it had also 3 arms of treatments. We had the gender light, which was really about the bank product, the digital sub-wallet product. Why we call it the sub-wallet? Because it allows women to save for more than one need. So the sub-wallet kind of addresses those more than one needs. And it uses a digital platform of mobile money for the women to be able to save and to save their money. So that was the gender light arm of the project, which really used the bank product, but at the same time it had a very strong aspect of financial training that helped women to look at budgeting, helped women to do goal setting, and also kind of reflect on their saving capacity. The gender transformative arm combined the bank product together with the household dialogue. This household dialogues targeted the households, especially those households that had power dynamics within, who had spouses and other power holders like mother-in-laws, daughters and sons that had also kind of influence on the way how financial resources are being used within the family. The implementation was done in partnership. The private sector was Postbank Uganda that worked together with CARE to design the product. We worked with Double X Economy as the research partner, and we had 2 implementing partners that did the actual implementation. Next slide. So on the digital sub-wallet outcomes, what did we do differently from other projects or other interventions? The product itself was designed together with women, so that the purpose for that was for the product to cater for women financial behaviors, while also addressing other barriers that come with the women when they're interfacing with the formal financial sector. We built the savings goals, which we call sub-wallet, together with women. But when you see the goals that were initially at the start of the project and the goals we had at the end of the project, you find that there is a difference. At the beginning of the project, there were these usual goals: the school fees, other other, school fees, food, and all that. But by the time the project ended, you could see change where women were starting to invest in land, buildings, to show that women were starting to think in terms of also having those productive resources and assets. We under this we had 1,613 members. Maybe something I forgot to mention, we used the VSLA, existing mature VSLAs as our entry point. And at the beginning of the project, the target was to, under this arm, was to reach 1,613 members. And out of this, who received financial literacy, 76 female members opened bank accounts, and bank accounts, which is the sub-wallet. You see that there was the improvement in terms of their, in terms of their savings over the 15 months that the project was implemented. Under different sub-wallets, they had saved up to the total of $102,762 US. In order to increase the enrollment and usage of the bank product itself, the bank had to introduce different alternative channels so that women were able to use those channels to be able to utilize their accounts. Next slide. On the household dialogues, you can see our sample was small. We worked with 263 members. And out of these 263 members, only 214, these 263 members received both intervention, the bank product and the household dialogues. But by the time of the end of the project, only 204 had enrolled for the bank product. And what was coming out in our, monitoring visits and support visits and interacting with these women, we found out that household dialogues created a safe space for household members to really freely express their views, created harmony within the household, and improved collaboration amongst the household members, not only amongst spouses, but we are talking about generally the household. Also, what is very clear is women who participated in the household dialogues were more active in household financial planning and decision making than those who didn't participate in the household dialogues. And of course, many of them reported improved communication. Next. We had challenges. When we went out there, we realized that there were many diverse family structures, polygamous families, couples living within extended families, and all those had unique needs and needed different kind of special guidance. So what we did was to develop special guidance for our facilitators to be able to deal with those different categories of families. We had also to introduce in, because part of the design didn't have that aspect of gender training. So we had to do gender equity and diversity mitigation and prevention of GBV training, especially among our frontline staff, so that they are able to kind of handle such cases. And we also had to develop what we call the GBV referral system in case of anything, so that they knew how to kind of support those couples that may have experienced that. And of course, there was that. I mean, this is not new. The women's law, technology, the illiteracy and digital illiteracy among women. So what we did for the project, we had to do targeted training or one-on-one sessions, and of course using the allo adopters especially young women as champions, so that they were able to kind of help other women that were struggling with the product. And of course, we had other challenges, the usual challenges that come with the digital financial services and the financial services general among women, cost of transaction, service connectivity, and all that. Next. So in conclusion, it's like we are saying that intervention seeking to improve women's empowerment and power over financial decisions may need to go further, just beyond providing financial services or products. They need, and they include or including aspects of addressing gender norms and the use of those services. What I've shared with you really are just preliminary findings, but the end line was done January, Feb, and the report is due to come out, but the preliminary findings point to the importance of household dialogues to shift household relationships and the women decision making. The household dialogues really help because they bring together on the same table different power holders within the household. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Fantastic and so interesting. I found it very interesting to see the shift in women's investment goals over time. Very interesting to see. And you've highlighted a couple of points that I think came up in the other presentations too. And first is that how you leveraged pre-existing women's groups, in this case VSLAs. It looks like all three of these transformative investments leveraged women's group platforms, which is something that we are seeing consistently across investments to be an important place to start. But you also showed another example of how shifting the gender norms required that deep, skilled work of intra-household dialogues, and even in your case, one-to-one training to help women get comfortable with the technology. And this raises a question for us about how interface heavy must transformative investments be, which is always a challenge for us of how to work at transformative initiatives at scale when we keep seeing again and again that this deep work engaging the both men and women pretty much has to happen. Thank you all. Time is running short, and I'm going to cut our panel discussion shorter. And meanwhile, I'd love for people to post their questions using the chat box. And let's have a quick round from all three of our panelists. And let me ask us to just focus in on, all of you have highlighted the differences between your transformative arms of the project versus your gender light and control arms of your programs. So why wouldn't donors and investors want to make all of their projects gender transformative? Why wouldn't you want to go transformative all the time everywhere? Are there trade-offs in doing this? And what's worked best in your experience, or what were some of the practical challenges? And if we could hear from each of you on that question, why wouldn't we all go transformative all the time? Gwyneth?
All right, thank you. I mentioned earlier in my presentation that gender transformative approaches do take time, and they tend to be intensive approaches. They require dialogue, and they require challenging assumptions that are long held. And so it takes time, and we often don't see results very quickly. And from my end, I think that we have to encourage donors to think of gender transformation as something that we have to do. It's the right thing to do. And I also believe that, in the international development community, if we are not challenging harmful gender norms, then we are helping to perpetuate them. And that's really not an acceptable situation. So I think that's, one of the messages that I really want to convey. I think we need also a little bit of a mindset shift away from measurement results, which we are always talking about in the development community, but it's less meaningful when you come to a concept like empowerment, which is dynamic and it shifts and it changes throughout your life. You'd be less empowered when you're young and more empowered and then less empowered again. So it's not a super meaningful metric to measure the success of our programs. So I think we also kind of need to shift away from that a little bit, which is ironic, coming from a project where we were doing a research design, but finding some way that we can balance those needs for data, but also for understanding that these are long processes that we have to do.
Thank you, Gwyneth. Powerful points. Pranati?
Thanks, Vicki. I would also agree to what Gwyneth said. While reflecting around why wouldn't donors invest on such gender transformative interventions in all the projects, I would say because these gender transformative interventions are both time and resource intensive, we want something quick to show maybe, and that's the reason we don't give too much time on these gender transformative approaches or models. At the same time, this also requires a lot of dedication from staff and staff capacity. Building staff capacity itself can take a longer period. Although these sort of investments can bring sustainable change in the communities, we normally do away from such things, which is for various practical reasons around time and resources that we have to deliver.
Yeah, thank you, Pranati. Grace?
Yeah, maybe because the why wouldn't have been covered by the first who responded, but maybe I'll talk more about the trade-offs, as I think probably if we really have to promote gender transformative interventions, because we know at the end of the day they will give us meaningful impact, the impact we are looking for, sustainable impact, especially amongst women and girls. We need to, first of all, here you say the trade-offs, we had to use those treatments, you have to, don't give some of the interventions to some of the communities, and others were left out, others, received the interventions. Those are some of the trade-offs that happened in these projects, but probably those are some of the things maybe we need to remove and probably look at what are the simplest way that we can deliver some of these approaches so that we reach as many women and girls as we can.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's a really important point, where we're withholding parts of the bundle from particular communities so that we can measure the impacts of transformative approaches. All right, do we have any questions from our participants? We've had almost 200 participants along the way. Any questions?
Yes, there are many. They're rich and fully engaged, which is very exciting. One of so there are a lot to sift through here, but one of the questions that kind of gets at a different angle of the question you just asked, Vicki, is around the structural barriers to gender transformation that are sort of beyond the household into the community and into the sort of wider ways in which gender norms and roles are enforced. And the question gets at both scale as well as these structural concerns and the ways in which each of these programs tried to or engaged with those concerns.
Great. Any three of you?
I could go first.
Thank you, Pranati.
So yeah, thank you. In the Women Project in Burundi, CARE actually we follow the CARE's women's empowerment framework, which focuses not just at the agency level, but at the relationship and the structures level. So when we were talking about in a gender transformative model, we engaged with not just women participants, but their male counterparts, male community leaders, and the wider community as well, because we are targeting or challenging the social norms, which can be addressed at the community level, so at the structural level. So that's the way we were focusing on the structural issues as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone else want to make a comment on that, or do you want to hear the next question?
I mean, I just wanted to say, I think two of the big structural challenges that we face in Cambodia is one, legal and policy frameworks, perpetuate gender inequalities, and also just the lack of services, particularly around gender-based violence and, households that are particularly vulnerable. And within the scope of our project, we didn't really have a lot of space to work on that, but I do think in a broader gender transformative program, it's really important to look at those and to see how you can strengthen those, referral and policy structures.
Great point. Great. All right. Other questions?
Absolutely. A number of people have asked about male engagement and the importance of including the male partner in the household or male community leaders as part of a gender transformative light or I don't know, dark, I don't know, deeper sort of gender transformative approach. And one of the questions was around whether male engagement is a requirement. Is there a disservice to or a pointlessness to empowering women if their male partner is not also in on that empowerment and equally engaged in that? And I'm wondering, the panelists, if they want to react to that, and if there's a sort of imperative to begin to engage men within the household and the communities as part of their gender transformative approaches.
Let me ask Grace to start with that one. Is there a pointlessness to trying to empower women unless you also engage the men?
I think men are very strategic. Let me use the word strategic partners in women's lives. Whether as the fathers, whether as spouses, whether as sons, neighbors, and all that, brothers. So to me, I think there is no way how you can divorce male engage from women empowerment, because they are very key and they surround the woman from all corners of her empowerment kind of, roots. So to me, I think it's very key and important. Maybe the difference is how do you engage them and when do you engage them?
Yeah. Gwyneth?
Yeah, I think one of the risks if you're not engaging men is, backlash. And you can certainly see that in programs that have, really only focused on women's empowerment and not engaged the men. So I do think it's important to have some male engagement, but like Grace said, it's how you do it. I don't think you necessarily need to engage men and women the exact same way in your project. You might have different kind of messages and ways of working with men. In our project, we chose to work with men and women together, but there were challenges with that as well. And it did sometimes inhibit women's ability to speak up and engage. So, yeah, I think you have to really think carefully about how you're going to involve men.
Yeah, thank you. And Pranati, the last word.
Yeah, sure. I think came up very clearly from our project. Our project participants themselves articulated the importance of engaging with men and boys early on, not at a later stage. So it actually came up from them. We understand that men are the gatekeeper. So unless we involve them, it is really difficult for us to work around gender transformative or women's empowerment issues. So yeah, definitely. I mean, it has come up from our project, from our participants themselves.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone. Unless I'm wrong, we are out of time. That went by so fast. I just want to thank our panelists, not only for speaking today, but for the very hard work and amazing work you've done in implementing these innovative programs for transformative results. It's been a privilege working with you over these years. I think we've all stood to learn a great deal from you. And to the hundreds of you who have been online listening to this, I know many of you, I'm recognizing many of your names, many of you are directly involved in implementing innovative programs to empower women around the world. And we all know this is very hard work, challenging, and thank you for what you're doing. And let's continue learning from one another. Thank you. I'm saying goodbye from Seattle, Washington.